Hey everybody, it's Allie and welcome back to another video. Today I am showing you how I am putting together my day in the life. I did my documenting yesterday, which was September 18th. Took photos, had a lens that I was using, which were some individual words that you'll see a little bit more about in a minute here. And I printed out most of my photos at 3x4 that went along with those main categories. And then I had additional images that I also wanted to include. So I printed some that were 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, so 2.5 by 2.5. That's what I'm cutting up right now. And those are going to go on to the piece of pattern paper or prompt paper that was included with the kit this time. So what I'm showing you here is just how I'm cutting up those individual or the individual smaller photos. I'm also going to add in a 2x2 page protector because I had more photos that I wanted to include. So after I finished up all those 2 1/4 images, then I went in and cut up my 2x2s, and then I'm going to include a 2x2 page protector basically as an insert along with the 3x4 cards and 3x4 photos that I'm using. So if you want to see what this looked like beforehand, I have a video here on YouTube and on the blog where you can see kind of just what the general layout was. And then I ended up taking more pictures than I thought I would, which is was actually pleasantly surprised at the number of photos I ended up taking. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough where I could actually use all of the photos that I took yesterday by cropping some of them down to 2x2 and adding in this other little insert that you're going to see here in a minute. When I'm doing collages like this, these 2x2s, I do it in Photoshop. I create a background canvas, which is usually 8.5 by 11, and then I resize my photos to 2x2, or in the case of that prompt paper, 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, and then I can print them all out on one sheet and then trim them out, which is what I am doing here. I always love seeing the little photos too. You know, it's like, I think I'm a really big fan of full page photos, and then I'm also a really big fan of the smaller photos too. All right, so I'm pulling out the divided page protector. I wasn't sure exactly how many I was going to have. I ended up with 14 2x2 photos. So I'm going to do 7 on one side and 7 on the other side. And I am going to trim off the outside edge of pockets. So it'll just have 2 rows or 2 columns of pockets there. So here you can see I'm just starting to kind of stick them in there. I kind of went based on the AM to PM sort of thing, but I wasn't super hooked up on that. I'm also going to have one pocket there that will be open because there are 8 pockets when you cut off the outside edge. So here I'm going to cut that off. You just lay it down on there. Make sure you don't cut the seam. If you cut the seam off, then you won't have pockets. So you want to keep the seam on there, and then I'm going to place all of those back inside. Later on, I end up adding a couple chipboard circles on the outside of the page protector in that empty pocket. You could use some of those tags if you wanted to. I decided to keep the chipboard tags from this particular kit and use them in another project in the future. Sometimes when we put these kits together, I use all the pieces. Sometimes I use some of them or most of them. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling when it comes time to put these together. In case you missed it too, I did put a blog post up yesterday that had a look at all of the photos I took, and I did some actual journaling alongside that there, and you'll see in a few minutes I ended up printing that out as well. I'm going to add an Avery index tab along the outside edge of the 2x2 page protector there, and that kind of acts as a little insert. And then the next thing I did was I'm taking the 2 1/4 inch photos and using some foam adhesive to adhere those down onto the back of this particular pattern paper. This pattern paper is fun because you could write in there if you wanted to. You could have journaling inside those spots if you wanted more spots for that. Or if you had a lot of photos like I did, you can just go ahead and add some of those photos on there. I like using the foam adhesive for a little bit of dimension. I'm going to use my rolling adhesive to adhere these 2 papers back to back. The other side is the timeline page, which I filled out as I went through the course of my day yesterday with some of the bits and pieces of things that were happening. Next thing I decided to do, so here you can see where my photos are. These ones I had already printed out and slipped inside the pockets. Then I'm going to use the little 3x4 stamp set that we offered with this collection and the little flags, the little banner flag stickers that were a part of the kit. And I'm stamping each one of the words that were those 8 main prompts that I had, and I'm just attaching them on top of there, so you can tell which photo goes with which bit of journaling if you couldn't tell when it comes along. If you couldn't tell, people could tell. It would be fun. It's just another little added something. You'll also notice that I'm putting them on the outside of the page protectors. It's completely up to you. I do it just sometimes because I feel like doing it, and I don't know if it's like a lazy thing where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to put it on the outside of the page protector because I don't feel like pulling all the photos out again. Sometimes that's the case. Other times it's fun to have things both outside and inside of the page protectors, and that's how I've been working a lot these days. So I'm using StazOn ink to stamp those little titles there. Those can be great too. You could use those when you are stamping out or when you're writing out your journaling on the 3x4 cards if you want. That would be another place that you could end up using them. I don't use them on mine, but I do use the numbers that were included on that stamp set there. So like a tiny little 1, 2, and 3 that just seemed like the best little bit of sizing for me. The other thing just to notice there is I did turn those banners upside down so that they were each pointing toward the inside of the page. Then I started the process of handwriting out my journaling. Like I said a couple minutes ago on my blog post yesterday, I went ahead and typed up reflections from the day. So some of those things are repeated a little bit on these cards and other things are not. And so that was part of the reason why I decided to just copy and paste all of the words that I had written on the blog post yesterday. And I'm going to add those on to, or you'll see in a minute, I'm going to print out a front and a back of an outside of the page protector page. I use color, so I use one page is pink and the other page is yellow, similar colors to the kits, and then oriented all of my journaling on top of there, and that's going to get adhered back to back, and you'll see more about that in a minute. When I was filling in my journaling on these cards, I wanted to play a little bit with different pens, different weights. On the other cards, I used our red ink to stamp the 1 and the 2, and I wish I would have done that on this one. I really like the little pop of red that comes from the ink. You'll see on a different one, it mimics the little star that's on the edge there. So some of these I used the numbers, some of them I just wrote out stuff, some of them I used the brush pen in conjunction with this Micron pen. This is a 0.05 Micron pen. I like the brush pen because it's so thick and I just think it's fun to write with. So that's the first one. I'm going to slip that right back inside there. That was work. So I highlighted 3 things that I did during my work day yesterday on that one. This one is watching, and the picture that I included of myself for this one was where I was watching volleyball practice. And so I essentially just watched a couple things, and that's what I said here. So I think I said 2 main things. I watched volleyball practice, and then I started watching The Perfect Couple, which is a book that I read. I think is that on Netflix? I think it's on Netflix. I watched 2 episodes of it last night after I got home and crawled in my bed with my dinner. And I thought it's fine. I'm not like, oh my God, this is the most amazing show I've ever seen, but it's a good distraction show. And I'm interested because I don't always remember exactly what happened in the book that I read, which I did read the book already. But so anyway, that was a little bit of that. You can see this one where I stamped the red numbers on there, the 01 and the 02, those tiny little numbers. They turn out so cute. And used the brush pen more like a title, and then the Micron pen as some of the details added in. And then I'm going to just kind of repeat these similar steps over and over again for each one of the 8 cards. One of them is a quote card, and I think I didn't take it to mean this time, or I wasn't looking for like a quote from a person in my life or an overheard sort of thing. So I just picked out a quote that I liked, and you'll see that added on there later. I had 2 driving adventures yesterday. The first one was taking Betty to the vet. So I wrote documenting that. And then the second time I was in the car was going over to Anna's school to help with their volleyball photos. So again, those are things that are included in the other journaling, but I'm doing it more in a visual way. There's no, I 100% could have done this without adding in what I did on the blog post. But I think part of it, because it's my job, and when I'm sharing on my blog post, sometimes I write different things than I would write on here. I just decided to copy and paste it and print it out and add it in. And then it actually gave me freedom. I felt free when I was writing on these cards to just write whatever I wanted to write, because I knew that additional pieces of the story were already included in the bigger journaling. I guess you could call it. Let's call it bigger journaling. And then on this one, I went ahead and I did bigger type or bigger writing on there. And I liked that too. Like when you're journaling on these kinds of cards or journaling on a day like this, sometimes you might have short stories. And so a fun way to document a shorter story is to go with a thicker pen, right? And have it be a little bit more about the handwriting or a little bit more about filling in the space. And this would be the same thing could be said if you're using fonts too, right? Like just going with the bigger size essentially to fill in the space. I'm a space filler inner. I fill in the space that's available to me, and I love that contrast between the thick and thin type. Then I wrote a little bit about my food for the day, the different things that we're eating. I'm in a super boring food season right now where food just seems really boring and nothing seems that exciting. As the months go along here, as we get more into winter, that's when I tend to like to cook more. I'm not a big summer cooking person, and we're in that transition season between the two. So actually, I did have 1 week, like last week I felt I was kind of excited about cooking, and then this week it's like the last thing I want to have to think about is what I need to eat. So I was happy to have some chicken thighs that I had cooked a few days ago, and that was like your future self. You're thanking you thank your past self for being smart and cooking some extra food so that I could just grab chicken. That was what I wrote about on there. Basics of everyday life. All right, and then here's the read card. I didn't read for pleasure at all yesterday. I'm also in a season where I haven't been reading as much, and I think it's just other work projects and volleyball. It's just I love it so much. I'm so happy about it. And for me, reading is always one of those things that ebbs and flows. And so I actually just got a new Book of the Month book in the mail yesterday, and I think that I'm kind of excited to dive into that later on this weekend. But it's a busy season right now, and that's part of what I always want to capture when I'm doing this project, that we're in the middle of a busy season, and we all get to choose the things that we want to spend our time on. So on this one, I ended up saying, I read the news via my New York Times app. I read texts from Isaac and Simon and Anna. I read emails. I read the schedule when I was at Anna's school, I read the map at Anna's school so that I could follow her daily schedule at back to school night. So those kinds of things. Always using that. The invitation is always there to you to do repeated journaling, where I read this, and then I read this, and then I read this. All right, then moving on to the wear category. This one I paired with a photo of myself in my closet. Often I wear very, very casual clothes working at home, and I'm just a casual person. I don't really care about dressing up that much. And that's become even truer as life has gone on for me. But yesterday I took a shower in the morning, and I, put on something I felt cute in, which was some jeans and a blue and white striped shirt. And then I ended up putting on a blue and white striped sweater vest before I headed out to hang out with the volleyball teams. And it was enjoyable. It was an enjoyable what I wore yesterday. And if I would have wore sweats, I just would have written about that too. There was the quote that I ended up doing, which is about having the courage to live the kind of life you want to live, focusing on whatever your most important things are. And then here are this is the blog post. So this is the text that was on the blog post yesterday that I added in with my photos. This is something that I do a lot in Week in the Life and during the Week in the Life project, where I always do a blog post each day. And it's like doing this right here times 7 is essentially what I do for Week in the Life. But this time it just made sense to me to, since I took the time this morning to write up my reflections on the day, I felt like it made sense to copy and paste those onto a onto a background. I just made the background canvas in Photoshop pink and then also made it yellow and set up the type in that way. Punch in the holes with the We Are Memory Keepers hole punch. It's one of my favorites. I do have a 6-hole punch and I use that most of the time, but if it's thicker, that doesn't work. And so you always want to, you need to have another option. And the We Are Memory Keepers hole punch is my favorite one. So as I was kind of figuring out what order I wanted this to go in, originally I had the photos first, but as I was trying to think through what seemed to make sense, I went ahead and put the timeline first, and then it has the photos on the back of there, and then it goes into my page protector photos, and then it has the 2x2s, and then the last page is the back-to-back journaling page. Here I'm slipping in a insert into the Avery Index tab that says stories from, or something from today, notes from today, details from today. The chipboard piece that I'm adhering on right there, that was from the September Stories by the Month kit this year. And then I'm also diving into my chipboard stash to find a second one that could go on the back there. And the one that I find is it says details of right now. So that fit in perfect. I'm going to use a little bit of red line tape on that one. This is also going outside of the page protector. Again, you can easily stick it inside. This is just what I choose to do sometimes. Finishing up punching the holes, and then you can see the full scope here. We've got the timeline first, then those a detail from today, then the first 4, then the 2x2s, then the second 4, and then the end there. Let me know if you guys have questions, and we'll be back next year for another day in the life.